Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Hi-Fi Hour. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Bob Robbins. Bob, how are you doing today?
Real well. Thanks for having me in.
For those of you that don't know who Bob Robbins is, he is an innovator when it comes to master placement of speakers. Now, we're going to get into it a lot deeper than that. That's very surface level, but Bob has truly mastered this art, and I feel that it's not being I guess shown enough to people, to audiophiles and to audio enthusiasts and to people just starting out, the real importance of where to put your speakers and how to place them and how to position them to play well with your room. So Bob, how did you get started in hi-fi? Let's start right there. It's way back in 1974, right?
Yeah, way back in high school, I had a gymnastics teammate of mine invite me to his house over after practice.
Mhm.
And he had one of the really cool old Bang& Olufsen turntables. And the aesthetics and the engineering in that product just fascinated me, and it got me hooked. And once I got into college, I'd go to stores with my best friend, and we'd sit and listen and ask questions and just kind of learn how all that stuff worked and how things are supposed to sound. And after college, I got into retail and started educating my mind and my ear for what's really right and what was really wrong with audio. And then quite a few years ago, I was working at Soundings here in Denver, and
Mhm.
the owner was nice enough to send me to Sumiko, which is based in Berkeley, California. And they used to give trainings to salespeople
Mhm.
because they just wanted to, in the master set, because they just wanted to get more people excited about audio, and they wanted to help salespeople sell more product, whether or not it was brought into the country by Sumiko or not. And after I heard the effects of that, it literally changed my audio life. And I made the decision that it needed to be shared with members of the public instead of just people in the audio industry. And that's what brought me to get my website up and running with a real good audio friend of mine. And then I was fortunate enough to do a video at the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest back in 2014. And it's been online since 2015, and been going with it ever since.
How do you feel the video was received by people in general? Was it kind of like a mixed review type deal where people was there positive and negative aspects to it?
Well, they're both, definitely. I gave that at kickoff time on a Sunday in Denver, and it was
Mhm.
a home Broncos game. So I was expecting maybe 3 people to attend, and there ended up being over 50 people in the audience.
Mhm.
One of them was the owner of Listen Up.
Mhm.
My son was nice enough to show up. And for the most part, the people in the audience were very receptive and open minded to it. But once I posted it online, then the quote unquote trolls started appearing, and I got some negative comments and people that really questioned how viable what I was talking about was. Um, but I've rolled with the punches, and been doing pretty well with things ever since.
Well, tell me a little bit about the process. Obviously, you don't have to give away any trade secrets, but I mean, I personally would love to go train with Sumiko or even with you to learn this art form because
Right.
it is important. People have to
Oh,
realize,
it's for me, it's
speakers.
the end all be all to get the most out of your hi-fi.
Well, certain
Um,
speakers are very directional, and some are,
mhm.
wider than others. But when they're directional, you got to know how to play them off your room. Can you explain a little bit more of the process that goes into perfecting the setup?
Well, first and foremost, there's a couple of real specific pieces of music that are used.
Mhm.
One's a very simple song called "The Ballad of the Runaway Horse." It's done by Jennifer Warnes, along with a bass player named Rob Wasserman. So, a very specific piece of music. Most audiophiles have a real good idea of where they want to sit They already have a preferred listening position. And so I base the set off of that. If they're open to moving things around, we can do it that way. Ideally, the speakers should be set against the long wall of the room instead of the short wall, which goes against a lot of audiophile and a lot of even speaker manufacturers' owners' manuals, because that gives more space for the speakers to breathe. There's less early reflections. There's more openness and just the more potential for an expansive soundstage.
Mhm.
And then when you play this piece of music, you listen first for bass, when bass really kicks in and when it's tonal, but not overly dominant. Bass is really tricky to describe how it should sound right. And you only do, of course, one speaker at a time. But once the bass is found, then you can move the second speaker in to get a nice, realistically sized center image for the vocalist. And then you make minor adjustments to toe in and what's called rake angle, which is the tilting back of the speaker until the sound just literally grows. It's an amazing process. My system at home, my speakers are barely 8 feet apart, and I have a realistically scaled and accurately sized soundstage 26 feet wide. It just, even all the years that I've been listening to it, it still amazes me every time I fire up my hi-fi. It's really fun. And
Now,
that in the end is what this hobby should be, is fun. So
exactly. I totally agree. And, I feel that speaker placement is very, very important for, stereo 2-channel listening. But what about home theater? Because home theater gets a little trickier, doesn't it?
It gets a lot trickier. But what's interesting is that the two main front speakers must be optimized to lay down the foundation for a great theater.
Mm-hmm.
Once that is done, then everything else can be done either by ear manually, or, there's a lot of real good self-calibration circuits in home theater preamp processors now that do a very, very good job. Back when I did Sumiko, they didn't have those. And so that they did a theater demo for us that they had a subwoofer for every speaker in the theater. And they played a sequence from The Color Purple, and it was mind-boggling how good it was. But the two main front speakers are the foundation, even for a good home theater.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And you do offer two ways of you do offer this service, so people can reach out to you and say, hey, obviously if they're in the Denver area or if they want to fly you out, you can come personally.
It's happened both ways.
You can come personally and master set their speakers and everything. Or you have a guide, correct? They can purchase online.
Yeah, I have a real concise but detailed setup guide that's available through my website, myspeakersetup.com. And they can just order it using PayPal. And if they want to do it themselves, they can. And they can always access me, ask me questions via email or by phone if they run into any difficulties. It's a real simple, straightforward process, but at the same time, it's very tricky. That's why I call it the art of rational speaker placement, because it's very rational. It's very logical when you start doing it, but there's an art to it. You have to educate your ear on what to listen for, what adjustments to make based on what you hear, and how to react to the results of any adjustments that you do make.
Now, our mutual friend, Jess over at Soundings, he told me that he kind of reiterated what you just said. He said it is a simple process, but it's very time consuming because they're very small adjustments that must be made. And then
can be sometimes seemingly completely irrelevant adjustments can make a dramatic change. in sound.
I think that a lot of people are neglecting this very, 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 very important aspect. And I'll be honest, just with my experience at Soundings,
Mm-hmm.
I went there as we discussed this actually prior. I went there when they brought in the Magicos,
Right.
and I heard them before Jess was able to master set them, and then I was like, okay, they're okay. You know, they sound
Right.
all right. You know, they're not the greatest thing in the world, but I mean,
Right.
they look good. You know,
Oh, it's a magnificent product line.
well, I went in there the second time after he had master set them, and I'm like, these don't sound like the same speakers.
Right. Done deal. Yep.
I mean, right off the bat, bass was heavier, clarity was better, soundstage
Mhm.
was out of control.
Mhm.
It
And
was
speakers were gone. You essentially lost the concept of there being sound coming out of the speakers.
right,
That's
right,
the coolest thing.
and that's the thing. I don't know why people would much rather spend $40,000 on a pair of cables than
Mhm.
$1,000 to have their system set up right.
Yeah, when there's $200 fuses out there and people think they actually make a difference compared to hiring me or the guys from Soundings to set their speakers for $1,000 or less, that would make a lifetime of change. It boggles my mind. And it, like I said, it's very frustrating, but it's the nature of the beast. It's just the way, like I said, the difference between the way the general public listens to music versus audiophiles, and then the
Mhm.
different mindset of both of those groups in relation to their music systems.
Now, I have a weird question for you. Do you, because a lot of people are concerned when the speaker's rear ported, front ported, or in the case of I don't, oh, you can't see the boxes back here. I have a couple of Sonus Fabers that
Mhm.
are have a stealth port on the bottom, as opposed to an acoustic suspension setup, or
Right.
a sealed thing.
Well, or what about a speaker by customers in Michigan? They had Martin Logans,
Mhm. Oh, so yeah, the electrostats.
electrostatics that are,
Yeah,
you know,
just totally over.
that's a
So
completely different animal.
what are
Yeah.
your opinions about each of those types of speakers, and for you, what's easier for you to work with?
Well, you know what? I've really never met a speaker that didn't receive a benefit from this process.
Mhm.
They all react to and work with the room a little bit differently, but
Mhm.
the more you work on the specific set, the more you can pick up the differences in how the speakers are reacting to the room. And it's mainly in the bass, but the bass frequencies also influence the tonal characteristics of the mid range,
Right.
particularly in vocals. That's why this song is so good, because it's so simply recorded that it reveals, if there's a problem with the bass, then the female singer, Jennifer Warnes, she's either going to sound chesty or
Mhm.
nasal or something. And so every speaker has its own idiosyncrasies, but the more you work with the speakers that the person owns, the more your ear kind of learns what's going on, and what placements and positioning changes will get the most out of that speaker.
Now, well, do you feel that like a ported or rear ported speaker um, plays different with the room, or than a sealed enclosure or a acoustic suspension?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
And
sure.
how do you feel? How do you feel that
Well,
goes
the
down?
speaker will either have to be less far into the room or further into the room, or the speakers will have to be further apart to make them sound clearer, or they'll have to be closer together than you'd think normal to make them sound warmer.
Hmm.
Or, it's impossible to say which design is going to sound a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's also the variable of the room. The
Hmm.
room is one of the biggest variables. I see pictures of people's rooms on the virtual systems on AudioGone, and they're like a racquetball court. They have a tiled floor, and they
Mhm.
have window shades, and they have nothing on the walls, and they have a great big hard-edged coffee table in between them and the speakers. They don't have a chance. They
Mhm.
just it just breaks my heart. It drives me crazy. And then on the other hand, you've got other people that have a room that's so full of clutter that the speakers have no room to breathe, and
Mhm.
so there's no space for them to reveal the illusion of the soundstage. They're fighting a losing battle before they even get started. So, yeah.
Well, I hope this helps the community realize that speaker placement is very important. I'm definitely going to be following this up with a more in-depth video, but I wanted to
Okay.
talk to one of the masters here, Bob Robbins, that has spent a lot of time and effort into really dedicating his life to perfecting this art. So if you guys are investing into a serious sound system, having someone like Bob come out and just adjust things to where you'll be able to enjoy your system a lot more. And like I said, in my experience, there is a substantial difference when you hear a pair of speakers that haven't been master set and a pair of speakers that have. So,
Without a doubt.
it's
One comment that I do have to go against one thing you said. It really doesn't have to be a real high-end system. One of my
correct.
first clients here in Denver had a pair of $800 tower speakers driven by a 18-watt Chinese tube integrated, and he's now one of my disciples.
Okay.
After I got done. So it doesn't have to be a high-end system.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally agree. Anything with speakers.
Oh yeah. as long as they're not surface mounted or in wall speakers, like for a theater, that doesn't work. They have to be able to be moved, and the customer has to be willing to allow them to be moved probably further into the room than they already are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for spending a little bit of your afternoon with me. Obviously, we have all learned that this is a very important thing, and I will put all the information for Bob's website and services in the description below, so everybody can have a chance to at least check it out.
Sure.
Give it the benefit of the doubt, and take a chance, and it'll surprise you. I guarantee.
Well,
it.
there's some pretty cool articles that I've written over the years that kind of give you an inkling of what's truly possible. It's pretty entertaining reading if you're into that kind of thing.
And I am into that kind of thing, so I will definitely check that out. All righty. Well, thank you, Bob, for joining me. Thank you all for joining us on Hi-Fi Hour, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Mucho apreciado.